Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. David, thanks for coming on the show.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So to start out with, you have an interesting background, coming from Hungary and going around the world in many ways. So maybe I'd love it if you could talk about that and elaborate on it a little bit and how you got from where you were to founding Red to Green.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my story started, I guess, when I was 19. I left Hungary and I used to study in Vienna and in Madrid. And after my studies, basically, Google reached out and it was all the glamorous experience. They flew me out to Dublin. I went through about 8 interviews, I believe, and then they offered me a job. And that's really where everything started with me with digital marketing. And that's where I really started to get interested in, how I can help people grow their businesses online with Google Ads first and then with other tools. So long story short, I got to the US about, I would say 8 years ago. And after about 2 years at Google, I decided to do something a little different. So that's when I started thinking, okay, what can I do that's a little different than what I see out there, and that's where R2G came up essentially. And we are really trying to provide a full service offer to everyone who is trying to grow their brand, mostly e-commerce and lead generation. And what has been missing in the past, or what I've seen at Google missing, is that people are too focused on a single source of traffic or a single source of revenue. And really, that's what we're trying to change by our approach. And we basically help e-commerce brands of all kinds and all sizes achieve success on Google, Facebook, Amazon, and more.
Yeah, it makes sense, and there's a lot that I definitely will dig into there. First, I was reading a little bit about your background, and you talked about growing up in Hungary with a post-Soviet mindset and kind of feeling lonely as a dreamer. So I'd love it if you could elaborate on that. Like, what did you mean by post-Soviet mindset, and
Yeah.
how would you describe that? Yeah.
That's interesting. So, yeah, I think the mindset really in Hungary or in some of these countries, everybody wants to break out. Everybody wants to, be the next big thing. Everybody wants to get away initially, go on an adventure and maybe return, maybe not. But the way you grow up there is different than the way you grow up in the US, right? Here, everything is given. Everything is convenient. Everything is possible, right? Everybody grows up with the mindset, I can be the best, the biggest, the most, whatever you want to call it, when I grow up. But in Hungary, your options are limited. The average monthly salary, I would say, is probably about $1,500. Not much you can do with that outside of the country, right? So when I say post-Soviet mindset, it really is just uh, it felt that I was just a little bit restricted within the framework of my possibilities. So I had to just explore and get out and break out and see what's out there and go with the flow. And that's exactly what I meant by kind of opening up my possibilities by being able to get away from that mindset of just staying and doing the work every day and nine to five and then going home and forgetting about it and then going back again tomorrow. That's really the overall approach that I've experienced around me that is very different now in the US, where everybody is pretty much trying to hustle their way through to success.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think one thing you mentioned there is that a lot of that mindset is about who you know and your network and all those things. So now that you've spent, a large part of your
Yes.
life working in the US, building a company here, how would you compare the reality on the ground? Like, in your experience, how much is it in the US about who you know versus the perception of that, if that makes sense?
I think there's a really clear distinction here in my country, at least the way it used to be. And I obviously don't want to talk about what's going on now because I've been away since I was 19, right? But it was really, really highly focused on, if you know someone, if you have a friend at this company, you're going to get a chance to get interviewed or you're going to get a chance to get hired. And if you have the ability to really showcase what's going on, and you're smart, then they're going to hire you because of your connections. That's really what I was referring to in terms of who you know. And when I said, post-Soviet, I didn't mean to offend anybody, but really there was a lot of handshake deals back then. You know someone, there's a mutual benefit to a deal for a deal to happen, and it will happen. So in the US, it's very different. I believe that it's still very important who you know, but it's more important how you portray yourself, how you show up where you need to show up. And I feel like the biggest example of us being able to make it work in the US is the fact that 19, 20-year-old kids can come out of college, come out of school and set up an agency and start making money. If they're smart, if they know what to do, if they understand the system, they're going to be able to actually be successful. Whereas in a different country, maybe it's not as easy as here.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like in the US, who will get you to the door, but you still have to walk through it. Whereas in, maybe the Soviet Union and other places, who is actually just the determining factor of everything. If you would agree, I'm not sure if you'd agree or disagree, but that's
Yeah,
kind of what it seems like.
more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of zooming forward and going to Google. I'd love to hear about that. Like what was the experience like? Like how did working at Google play out versus how you expected it to play out
Mhm.
before you started working there?
Sure. Yeah. So Google was a dream. I mean, anybody who had the fortune to work for a company like Google understands that it's almost like going into Candyland, like Willy Wonka style. You go in, you feel extremely empowered. You're part of a huge organization. You understand that you work for Google. It makes you proud from day one, right? it it is again, as I said, it's a dream. You go in and you see all the clean layouts, the workstations. You see all the little kitchenettes, on every floor. You see the music room, the playroom, this room, that room, free food. I mean, who wouldn't want to work there, right? And you're getting paid well. So obviously this is something that works really well for college graduates, because when you come out, this is what you experience, this is what you get used to. So for me, as I said, it was an incredible opportunity, and I'm forever grateful to be able to say that I'm an ex-Googler. But it becomes a little bit different, is I would say after about 3-4 years, when you start realizing that there's more to it than your particular job, right? Huge organization, everybody has a job. Your job is limited to 5-6 different areas. You really can get out of that loop. So when you start realizing that in order for me to learn more, to do more, I need to be able to experience more, at that point you might think, okay, I either change positions within Google because it's a large organization, there's other jobs, or you know what, whatever, I'm 28, let's just figure it out on my own, let's see if it works, and if not, guess what, these guys still remember me, so I might be able to come back. So that's really the thought process that goes down. If you are at Google, you're happy with what you have, but you just crave more, and that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, that's funny. And I had, I think I ended up with a similar experience leaving a small agency and then starting the business I have now. I never worked for a big company, but I think the similarity is those early days where you come out of this company and now you're just trying to start a business. And there's a show in the U.S. called Better Call Saul, where
Yeah.
in the first season he's just like bouncing around between all these mismatched weird clients. And I think I had a trucking company. And I was trying to give them sales tactics and sales advice and a bunch of other clients that, I had no business
Yeah.
trying to help. And then eventually I found my niche in the agency world because that's where I had experience. So I love to hear what that journey looked like for you. So you come out of Google. I want to circle back to things with Google, but first this question landed in my head. So what were those early months or years like of trying to go from this regimented corporate environment to building a
Yeah.
business from scratch, basically?
I mean, man, I would do anything. Like, I got out, and anybody that wanted help, I was ready, right? Because it was so new, it was so exciting. It was just a breath of fresh air for me. So I did work with, like your example, like somewhat similar of a trucking company. I worked with a spa. I worked with I think it was a software that they tried to promote. And it felt good because it was extremely personal. They really respected the fact that I had the opportunity to work for Google, and it made it so fulfilling, many times more fulfilling than versus if you have a big $2 million agency and you have 100 clients, right? It's so fulfilling because you still really get to feel their success or their pain, depending on what's obviously what the outcome is. But for me, getting out of Google and trying to set up my own practice basically was an eye-opening experience. And you know what was the most exciting as well as scary thing to realize is that, excuse my language, but I don't know crap. Like, it's essentially, that was the main sentence that popped up in my mind after about 6 months. I was like, wow, my knowledge is extremely niche. My knowledge is extremely focused on one area of digital. And guess what? There's about 16 other areas I need to get really good at within 2 months. So it was exhilarating, but also it was scary. So my journey really started off as an entrepreneur by learning a lot more. And then slowly but surely, I realized, that was about 6 years ago now. I realized that I need to find my niche, just like you said, and started putting the bricks on top of each other, and eventually ended up where I am right now.
Yeah, and I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. Did you always kind of start building the business with the focus or with the intention of trying to specialize or find a niche or however you want to phrase it? Or is that something that became obvious? And then from there, how did you land on e-commerce and the services you're providing now?
Yes, so I always wanted to specialize because I've always believed what I saw in Google. I was fortunate enough to manage a team of about 25 people, handling a lot of agencies from North America. I would say about 30 to 50 agencies. And what I saw is that the majority of those agencies did anything they could just get their hands on, right? And that's not very focused. That's not very good, because how can you help a medical spa the same way you're helping a trucking company, right? With your example, it's really hard to become a different person every time you hop on a call. So what I realize is that I got to niche down. I got to see what I'm really good at, what I can measure, and then how I can really improve business from my perspective. So I ended up at e-commerce because it's very simple. You put in $1, you get out three. You understand what's going on. There's tracking. You understand exactly how that goes down, because the entire process is online versus, let's say, I would say a trucking company, right? They might get a phone call that is not tracked online. So then you're losing the ability to really track everything you're doing. So after about a year, I realized I got a niche down, and that's exactly when it happened. And we were in a fortunate position of being able to handle about 15 different brands, all from the same area, which was all apparel. And at that point I was like, okay, well, you know what, clothing is an area that I'm really good at. Let's figure out if I'm really good at home goods. Let's figure out if I'm good at any other e-commerce related businesses. And it turned out that we were really able to get good return for mostly every e-commerce brand we worked with. And as a result, I was like, hey, you know what, we're good at it, it's measurable, we know what we're doing, let's just niche down to it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I know that the way that you sort of market your own agency is your, with your background, kind of being a former Googler and the experience you have there. So, give us the goods. What tangibly are you bringing to the table as an ex Google employee that another SEM expert might not?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to it. Obviously, my background in Google, it just allows me to build a system that is slightly, in my opinion, better than most others out there. So I, by this point, it's been 6 years. I'm not leading with the fact that I'm an ex Google employee. I think it's old news. It's fun, it's good. It gives you the the pledge, but honestly, it doesn't mean much anymore to me. What does mean a lot to me is that I managed to take Google's system, Google's infrastructure, and implement it in a small scale in our agency. So what we are able to do, first of all, I'm always striving and aiming to hire people that are smarter than me. So I truly believe that the people that work at R2G are better at their discipline, much better than me, and that's how it's supposed to be. Number two, the structure I experienced in Google, the tracking and understanding that it's a holistic approach to advertising versus just maybe different silos, allows us to provide a service that touches on every angle of growing an e-commerce store. And it starts with the website, understanding the conversion rate on the website, understanding their funnels. It goes on with understanding whether they're even competitive. Is there 15 other products on the market that are similar to them? So when someone comes to work with us, what we provide is a full analysis on their competitive landscape, their website, their conversion rate, their funnels. And only after that, we start looking at their advertising channels. And once we look at their advertising channels, we look at what platforms they're currently on. Do they even have good creative? Do they have good images, good videos to work with? So we provide everything under one umbrella, so that if you're a business owner, an e-commerce business owner, all you got to do is just focus on Shopify, focus on your fulfillment, focus on your customer support, because this is very important. We just take care of your creatives, your design in-house, and we take care of optimizing your channels. And then that's exactly when growth happens.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It kind of reminds me of a quote that I heard kind of belated recently for the first time. I think it was from Godin, but I might have that wrong. Where it's,
Mm.
don't find more people for your products, find more products for your people. And it sounds like you've kind of honed in on apparel brands. You found something that you could do really well there. So I have a couple questions with that. Let me start with Amazon, the elephant in the room, or not so much the elephant in the room of e-commerce.
Yeah.
How have you decided to interact with Amazon? Are you guys setting up shops there? Are you staying away from it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think Amazon is definitely the you cannot even call this the next big thing anymore, because it is the current big thing, right? But for such a long time, advertisers were really stuck in between Google and Facebook. That was all they could do and nothing else. So finally, recently, I would say in the past couple of years, we had the ability to really double down on Amazon. And when I say Amazon, we are talking about Amazon advertising. So everything we do at R2G is acquisition. So we only deal with the advertising part of each platform, and the fact that we can understand how things work from my Google experience, as well as the company's Google experience of spending roughly over $100 million throughout our careers. Whatever works in Google will work in Amazon. Whatever works in Amazon will work in Google. So the fact that we have it kind of like like a symbiotic relationship. They exist, they coexist. So Amazon for me is an extremely large opportunity, and anybody who is starting an agency or anybody who's thinking about scaling a brand, they need to look at Amazon as a great benchmark that will tell them whether their product is going to work on other platforms or not.
Yeah, and it's funny, and I've talked about this in previous interviews, but we had Roy Sutherland on, a few months ago or a month ago now, and he's a VP at Ogilvy, and he made the observation. It's kind of like joking, slightly hyperbolic, that back to the Soviet thing, Amazon is very Soviet in a way where there's a lot of products that aren't really tied to much emotion. They're sort of put in front of you based on cost and very legible numeric, qualifiers and stuff. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, would you agree or disagree? And where have you guys chosen to play ball within the Amazon ecosystem at this
Yeah,
point?
I think I do agree, somewhat agree. I think obviously everything is being governed by different AI in this day and age, right? So don't think that when you're browsing on Amazon and something just pops up, don't think that's coincidental or by chance. Not at all. I do agree that we are being controlled, quote unquote, and our emotions are being directed. Okay, so if you feel a certain way about a certain product, probably it's because you were triggered, maybe an hour ago, maybe last week, but you were triggered before, right? So in that sense, I do agree that it's very emotionless. But then I have to bring another point in, which is, okay, fine. So once you're being shown those 5 products, right, by AI, they still need to stand out. And that's where emotion really comes in. They still need to have a title in Amazon specifically. They still need to have the reviews. They still need to have the description that will connect with you on an emotional level, on an impulse level. So I think it's a mix. I think very accurately put, I think it's a mix between our ability, when I say our agency's ability to really touch on those pain points that the customers have, as well as the AI's ability to find these customers based on their past behavior.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure there's a lot more we can dig into with Amazon, and it's moving very quickly and evolving very fast. So, but to shift gears a little bit, you've talked about kind of honing in on apparel brands, and my guess is this isn't like a starting apparel brand. It's probably somebody that's graduated to a size that they can take you on and work with you and do all that stuff. So it's a limited total addressable market. It sounds like, and I'm asking this because we kind of have a similar challenge where we tend to work with agencies roughly like 10 to 200 employees or so in the US and Canada. So that's now limiting us to not a whole ton of companies. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how are you going about kind of like marketing and selling to this limited pool
Yeah.
over a longer time horizon?
Yeah. So I would say what we really honed in on is more about brands for the home, I know it's not a term that's being widely used, but it's clothing, it's your blanket, it's your kitchenware. It's like anything you would use in an everyday basis, right? Because we found that people make those decisions impulsively. People make those decisions really quickly, and especially with the pandemic, we've seen a huge growth in this particular segment within e-commerce. So I think, to your question as to like how limited or unlimited this market is indeed limited. But for us particularly, we are a small boutique agency. We are not trying to become a large agency. I always had the goal of keeping a balance between being able to serve our customers. For our customers to be able to talk to me or my co-founder, it's still very important. And if we have 200 clients, that probably cannot happen, right? So we are really trying to cherry pick, if you may, offer a service that's a little bit more comprehensive, and grow by horizontal expansion, if you may, which will really allow us to create those relationships with our customers. And I think that's what's missing from bigger agencies. And that's exactly my argument when I talk to someone and they say, I'm deciding between you and maybe a large agency with like 2,000 people, is that you can be number one in our agency. You can be priority number one, and you can be priority number 157 at the other agency. So choose what you prefer. And that's really, for me, that's why the size of the market may not matter that much, because all I need is quote unquote a handful of good high spend or high revenue customers that then will in return reward me with their trust.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and that's kind of what we're seeing as well, where it's like if you're doing more things or solving harder problems, it really doesn't infinitely scale. It's really hard to make that realistically happen. If you ever run a software business or something, it's different, but not for what we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, kind of getting into building in public and what you're doing within the agency, I'd love to just hear like what's your day to day look like as CEO at this point, 6 years in. What's your day to day like?
Sure. So my day to day really is, I'm trying to get very structured about how I go about my business. So um, personally, I am really big on personal time separated from work time. So if I can just tell you about my day, I wake up around 7 a.m. I meditate. I do my daily gratitude. I work out. I take my dog out. So I probably don't even touch work until about 8:30, and then I start with something called a deep work block. So for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I'm not looking at Slack. I'm not looking at emails, not looking at anything. I'm trying to get out those bigger tasks first that I have, which are usually very much dependent on the current season or the current month, but it's usually related to creating and managing partnerships with other companies. It's related to putting out the bigger fires that we may have in the organization in terms of structure, and checking in with my team as to how each and every account is doing and how we can improve them. So right now, for example, this Q3 just started. We just finished our Q3 planning for all our clients, and now we are just going down the task list. So my life, my average day, if you may, starts with some deep work, and then kind of transitions into my meetings in the afternoon. And my meetings can be anything from, as I said, meeting another sales prospect that wants to talk to me, or having a check-in with my team, or working on a new initiative that we are launching. For example, we are really focused right now on launching a conversion rate optimization AI. So I'm working on implementing that to our systems. That's really how my day looks like. And then at about 6, 7, I'm trying to be good about it. Sometimes it's hard. At about 6, 7, I stop working, and I still give myself some time to relax and kind of decompress from the day, because it's I know in nowadays culture, a lot of people are super proud of working 12, 15 hours a day. I can see how that is, how that is something to be proud of. But for me, I'd rather have 8 hours of really focused and fresh brain work versus just grinding myself down to a point where everything is just not as good as it could be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was smiling all through that because it sounds very much like my schedule, to do kind of the same thing, deep work in the mornings. I think it is personal kind of when you decide to prioritize deep work and other things and
Yeah,
so on. And with that in mind, to kind of like selfishly pick your brain, because I think a challenge for me hasn't so much been at this point blocking off the time for deep work. It's more about figuring out what sort of tasks are meaningful and what I should actually be doing versus delegating or not doing it all. So it's kind of a tricky question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how are you coming up with these deep work tasks and deciding what you do versus delegate and that sort of thing?
sure. Yeah, so I have a very small kind of like stupid system, but basically every task that I have, I put it in one of two columns, right? One column says in company, the other one says on company. So essentially, what I really want to do, I want to work as much as I can on the company, not in the company, because in the company is really, it's busy work, putting out fires, optimizing things. So if I have the ability to pick deep work items, I would rather pick from the on the company bucket every morning. So basically, what I do, I plan my months out for the year. We have our revenue goals, right? We have our bigger initiatives. So every day I'm trying to get at least one on company task done. And then I feel good about it. And then, of course, after that, I can move on to whatever else is necessary. But that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just ask yourself a question. What is it that I really don't want to do? Like, what is it that I really don't want to do as a task? And then once you identify those tasks, then you decide, can I delegate this? Yes. Okay, great. Now we feel better about it. But if you can't, you better start with it, because in the morning, you have the most mental energy, you have the most physical energy. And guess what? If you work from 8 to 10 and then you're done with your least wanted task, all the rest of the tasks you're doing that day are going to be more and more pleasurable as they go. Um, so that's really my strategy usually.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's like I was talking to a friend the other day who runs a business as well, and he kind of made the point that in the early days of starting a business, when everything's kind of newer, a lot of it is about leaning into the resistance and doing the things you don't want to do. And for a lot of people, it's sales calls or prospecting or dealing with some problem. And I think that as you get further into a business and you kind of get help and you're delegating things, it moves from that to just more about like what are the things that I actually enjoy doing, where does my superpower live, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I think that it sounds like with your agency, with our company as well, the owner, in my case, myself, I'm still the one kind of in the sales seat, quote unquote, talking to prospects. I think even in very large agencies that we work with, sometimes in 50, 100-person agencies, the partners are still in the sales seat. But I'm always thinking, every business, even a service business that can scale, eventually the owners get out of that and hire somebody else to do it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, are you planning to hire somebody, or do you want to remain in that seat forever? What are your thoughts?
So we actually have someone who is our head of growth, we call it. And this person is handling all sales activities in the company. So essentially the way it works for us is I do want to make myself available for people who are interested in talking to me, but at this point there's so many other people in this machine that are better at their certain discipline that I don't feel the need to talk to every single person that comes through our door. And the best system that I can build is the one that functions without me, because it's not about me anymore. It used to be about me in year one, right? It used to be about David, ex Google, whatever. 6 years in, it's really not about me. It's about our results. It's about the brands that we work with. It's about what we can offer. So for me, it's really hard not to be on every sales call, not to be involved in every single um, element of the business, but I just have to do it in order for me to be able to focus on how to grow the business and how to offer a better service. Because what clients really want, they want to trust you with their money, with their time, and they want you to grow their business, right? The best way I can help them is to make the team that's working on it better, and is to enable that team to either learn, progress, or just be able to really provide them the tools that they need to become a $10 million company from a $1 million company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to dig into that a little bit, so the idea of like systems that can run without you, can you talk about what that looks like on the internal sales and marketing front? Like, what is that head of growth doing? You know, what systems did you build for that person to be
Yeah,
successful, and so on? Yeah.
sure. So in simple terms, our systems are as follows. We have a prospecting angle, let's just call it that way, where we are reaching out to certain clients or leads that we think would be a good fit for R2G. Once someone is interested, then we put them on our sales cycle, let's call it that, where our head of growth is essentially handling a bunch of calls. We have an intro call and a demo call with anyone who is interested to join the company, and that includes a large audit on their accounts, on their website, on the pricing, on the product. So essentially everybody that comes through the door is being greeted by our head of growth, and after that is being greeted by our team, depending on what discipline they're interested in: Amazon, Google, Facebook. So after about 2 to 3 calls, we are able to make a recommendation whether it's a good fit or not a good fit. Sometimes we see companies that are just not a good fit for our model, and that's totally fine. We will still give them tips and tricks to increase their growth. But eventually, if we find someone that we'd love to work with and they would love to work with us, we shake hands, and then we hand everything over to our internal teams, which is being handled by our lead project manager, who essentially assigns everything, onboards them to our portal. We have a portal we developed that clients can come to, can see their performance on a dashboard, can upload files, can reach out to us with messaging. And once they're in the system, they're in the system. And then we shift over to the next step of the process, which is building an optimization and regular check-ins with the respective clients.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to dig into hiring a little bit more, are there any big roles that you're looking to hire for? Are there any things that are still on your plate or on other people's plates that you're looking to get off? And I'd just love to hear kind of your thoughts
Yeah,
on hiring writ large. Yeah.
we are always hiring. Actually, we're always looking to hire the next best, the next best optimizers, the next best project managers, salespeople. So we're always on the look for someone who is hungry and has the quote unquote fire to really grow and to manage larger budget accounts and to understand how we take, to put it very simply, we're looking for people who want to learn how you take a company from 0 to 1 million, and then how you take a company from 1 million to 10 million. There's a very different strategy to do that. So yes, our biggest and most attractive positions that we hire for are always going to be Facebook ads specialist, Google ads specialist, or Amazon specialist. But we are always also hiring for a lot of other work, like sales related work, or website or conversion rate optimization related work.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And out of those, is there one that you found harder to find skill sets for and hire for, or they kind of are they all just hard?
They're all pretty hard because it's easy to hire someone. It's not as easy to keep someone. So when we hire, we have a very specific set of interviews that we conduct that include I call it the deep interview, but it's just simple terms for getting to know their why. Why do you want to do this? What's the point? You're good at what you're doing, but do you really want to do this? Do you want to wake up in the morning and are you excited about handling an account? Are you excited about optimizing? What's going on? And we spend an hour just talking. Like, it's almost like a session, like it's like therapy. Tell me about your life. Tell me about what motivates you. Tell me about what you like. And then I'm able to really understand whether this is their passion, or they just think that, okay, well, I have this skill. It's good money. Let me just do this for a few years. This is a very different motives inside a person that can last long, or that can last just a short amount of time. And the problem I have is, when we hire anyone, we're going to put in about 6 months worth of training in them. Okay, all the systems, all the techniques, all the tips and tricks, all that knowledge that we gathered over managing over 100 clients, $100 million. That needs to be instilled in the new people that come on board, right? So if someone is not exactly dedicated to stay for too long, all that effort is going to be wasted on both ends. So hardest to hire for is probably just just the cultural fit. It's not really about the expertise. It's about finding the people who are here to stay and who has the quote unquote fire in their eyes to do it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and it's simple but not easy to do that. So
No, it's hard.
right, right. So it's kind of getting towards the end of our time. I'd love to just hear, what's most exciting you now, either about what you're working on or what you're seeing, trends and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think for me personally right now, there's a couple really exciting things. So until now, it's been 6 years. We never advertised. We never advertised ourselves. We were all only referral based. We grew exponentially like that. But now we are actually going to start pushing out some content and pushing out some ads so that we can reach, I guess, the further corners of the world when it comes to e-commerce advertisers, right? So I'm really excited about presenting the world with a system that we have, that we developed, to really help them grow as an e-commerce brand and to really bring them from, as I said, pretty much zero to 7 figures or even 8 figures in some cases. So that's super exciting for me. And the next big thing that is exciting for me is the fact that we are really working on a tool. We actually partnered up with a tool that is able to optimize different websites, mostly Shopify based, on the go when it comes to optimizing your conversion rate. Okay, so that is an extremely efficient tool that would help you beyond advertising, and that's what excites me, because I believe that advertising is just one tiny part of the whole puzzle. You probably have about 17 different things you got to put together, so we're really trying to own the entire funnel and own the creative, own the funnels, own the ads, and hopefully create an experience for the customers that will enable them to enjoy the product and will enable the businesses to grow their revenue.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could do, a whole nother episode about that. It's super interesting when you can kind of eat your own dog food and do for yourself what you do for clients and vice versa. So I'd love to hear how that goes. And beyond that, how can listeners follow what you're up to, get in touch, and so on?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. If anyone wants to get in touch, just go to our website. It is r2gdigital.com. Two is with a number, and just fill out a contact form, or they can also just email me directly if they'd like. It's David at r2gdigital.com. I'll be happy to help if I can.
Awesome, David. This was great. Thank you so much for your time, and hope to have you back on in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a great one.
You too.